we need to talk about Microsoft, or Xbox Game Studios more specifically. In March of 2021, Microsoft bought Bethesda Game Studios for $7.5 billion. That's right, and that figure looks just like this. Now that's a lot of money. So why buy Bethesda? Well, for their legendary IPs and having the ability to sell their games as exclusives for the Xbox. Their fantastic backlog includes the Elder Scrolls series, which featured the blockbuster titles like Skyrim, Oblivion, and Morrowind. And then of course there's the Fallout series, which included the smash hits Fallout 3 and 4. Included in the package of studios acquired by Xbox was Bethesda Studios' Arkane Austin, developers of the disastrous Redfall, and Tango Gameworks, who had developed Ghostwire Tokyo, The Evil Within 1 and 2, and most recently the extremely successful Hi-Fi Rush. So, quite a good return from Microsoft in terms of investment, right? Well, no. Just last month they officially closed down Bethesda Studios' Arkane Austin and Tango Gameworks. They also closed down Alpha Dog Games and Roundhouse Studios. In an email sent to staff by Matt Booty, head of Xbox Game Studios, Microsoft blamed the cuts on a reprioritization of titles and resources. He said, "Today I'm sharing changes we are making to our Bethesda and ZeniMax teams. These changes are grounded in prioritizing high-impact titles and further investing in Bethesda's portfolio of blockbuster games and beloved worlds which you have nurtured over many decades. To double down on these franchises and invest to build new ones requires us to look across the business to identify the opportunities that are best positioned for success. This reprioritization of titles and resources means a few teams will be realigned to others and that some of our colleagues will be leaving us." After announcing the closure of so many well-known studios, he then went on to say, "Tango Gameworks will also close. We are thankful for the contributions to Bethesda and players around the world. Hi-Fi Rush will continue to be available to players on the platforms that it is today." So, just to reiterate, Hi-Fi Rush released in January of 2023. It won both the BAFTA Games Award for Animation and the Game Award for Best Audio Design. It was praised as a creative game which captured the imagination of gamers and critics alike. People generally loved it, and having played it myself, I can confirm that it was amazing. It looked good for Xbox as well, as they've been slacking as of late in dropping exclusive games, and now they finally had one. But they shut the whole studio down anyway, despite singing their praises. But look, it's a business, right? If money's tight, then money's tight. Well, here's the thing, Hi-Fi Rush came out in January of 2023, and then in October of that same year, Microsoft bought Activision for $70 billion. That's right. Now try and make that make sense. Now, naturally, they had to balance the books somewhat and decided that shutting down these studios could help make up the deficit. Now, you can argue that Redfall was a disaster, and as a result, Arkane Austin can't really have any complaints about being shut down, but Tango Game Studios delivered with Hi-Fi Rush. Xbox's Vice President of Games Marketing, Aaron Greenberg, said that Microsoft were very happy with the game's overall performance. He said, "Hi-Fi Rush was a breakout hit for us and our players in all key measurements and expectations. We couldn't be happier with what the team at Tango Gameworks delivered with this surprise release." Couldn't be happier. Well, that's awesome. Let's get Hi-Fi Rush 2 in the works and then... oh. So what the heck is going on at Microsoft? How does a game deliver on all metrics, get praised by the vice president of the company, and then get shut down no more than a few months later? Well, let's get into it and discuss why Xbox is failing. Quick side note, I'm a new channel, so if you're new here, please consider subscribing. And a huge thank you to everyone who has subscribed so far. It honestly means the absolute world. Anyway, back to the video. So let's start at the beginning and go back to the year of 2001. At this time, two consoles were dominating the market, both of Japanese origin, the PlayStation and Nintendo. These two have been around for years and they were established brands. Both the Sega Genesis and the Dreamcast had tried to break into the video game world as independent consoles, but neither had survived. It seemed that there would only be two major consoles until Microsoft announced the launch of the original Xbox. It had stellar graphics, faster loading times, no need for separate memory cards, it was competitive financially and offered a selection of original IPs with one particular game called Halo. Halo ticked a lot of boxes and it looked great for its time. Xbox was able to graphically compete with the PlayStation 2, and it had titles like Halo that competed with anything that the other two consoles were able to bring. But it was the Xbox Live service that launched in November of 2002 that upped the ante. It allowed players to play games online with a broadband connection. It first competed with the Dreamcast online service, but later primarily competed with PlayStation 2's online service. Xbox Live was a success due to it having better servers, features such as a buddy list, and milestone titles such as Halo 2, which became the best-selling Xbox video game and was by far the most popular on-game for the original Xbox system. Xbox had found itself and offered something that the other two consoles hadn't quite managed to crack: online play. With this and exclusive titles such as Halo, the Xbox had officially solidified itself as a major player in the console wars. Fast forward to November 2005 and Microsoft dropped their next generation console, the Xbox 360. The PlayStation 3 wouldn't drop for another year and it would be much higher in price, so this allowed the Xbox 360 to outshine its rival, at least for a period of time. Nintendo went on to make the Nintendo Wii, which, whilst it was a success, did not compete directly with the other two consoles. Its graphics were still older, and it was more about the motion controllers rather than the actual titles. Only the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 could show off the next generation graphics, and they would go head to head. Xbox would drop more exclusives such as Gears of War, Fable, BioShock, Halo, and much more. The console had some issues, but on the whole it improved on everything that they'd done with the last generation Xbox. The online play was much smoother, the exclusive game list was larger, and it was at this point that the Xbox console established itself not just as a main competitor, but it was winning the race. Surely they were destined to come out on top, right? Nope. In 2013 they released the Xbox One. This console didn't really add any new exclusives to the console, and its main features were its streaming services for shows and movies, and its new feature called the Kinect. Why didn't this console, unlike the previous two, have any good exclusive releases? Because although Xbox had been a leader in terms of software development with their online play and console features, they lacked creativity. They could create software, but they never really grasped what made a great game. It started with the acquisition of Rare in 2002. Now, Rare were the kings of the time at making games. For the Super Nintendo, they made Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3. For the Nintendo 64, they created GoldenEye, Diddy Kong Racing, Perfect Dark, Banjo-Kazooie 1 and 2, Conker's Bad Fur Day, and much more. They were, at the time, possibly the greatest video game studio and produced smash hits for Nintendo that are still revered today as some of the best. And then Microsoft bought the studio in 2002. Up until that point, Rare had released 97 titles. After Microsoft bought them for $375 million in 2002, they have since released just 15 games. So that's nearly 100 in the 12 years prior to Microsoft's acquisition, and then just 15 games made in the following 22 years. Strange, right? Now, you might argue that that's just the times and games take longer to make. But after the purchase of Rare, the team that had made the smash hit GoldenEye for the Nintendo 64 immediately left and formed Free Radical, who made the Time Splitter series. Free Radical never quite hit the heights of GoldenEye with the Time Splitters franchise, but they still beat out anything that Rare would make with Microsoft afterwards. None was more evident than when they released Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts in 2008. Prior to this, Banjo-Kazooie had been a simple 3D world platformer. It holds fantastic reviews and it's considered a classic. Made by the core team that developed the first Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts received significant criticism from players due to its focus on vehicle construction rather than the traditional platforming. Neither old fans of the original or new fans found any love for the game. It did not do well and failed to replicate the success of the previous two games for Nintendo. Microsoft would then restructure the studio after the game's failings, and later that year, Microsoft confirmed that Scott Henson, a developer who had worked on the hardware and software designs of the Xbox 360 console and Kinect, replaced Mark Betteridge as studio manager and announced a focus on Xbox Live avatars. Rare also shifted their focus to Xbox One's new feature, Kinect. According to Henson, Kinect will be the main focus for Rare going forwards as it's a very rich canvas. This is just the beginning of an experience that will touch millions of people. So basically what happened is that one of the most successful video game studios who had a magnificent partnership with Nintendo was bought out by Xbox. For some reason, most of the team would leave to go on to form their own studio and develop Time Splitters. Those that would stay would release a few weak entries and then eventually be converted to simply a Kinect game studio. You have to ask yourself, why? Why would the bulk of the team leave? Why would they completely change the design of Banjo-Kazooie, from a platformer to a vehicle creation game? Why would they switch to making Kinect games? I think it's fair to say that Microsoft had a hand in their downfall. Microsoft took the most successful studio for its time, told them that they knew better, discouraged any creativity, and in the end forced them to make games for the new Xbox feature, the Kinect. It's so sad, but it's not the only example. Bungie Game Studios were the creators of Halo 1, 2 and 3, the series' most successful games. They asked Xbox to allow them to work on a new IP, create something different, but Xbox pushed back and said just stick with the Halo series. They left and have now gone on to make the incredibly successful Destiny series. Then there's Lionhead Studios, who created the famous Fable game. After the success of the first game, the studio was acquired by Microsoft for at least $75 million. Microsoft wanted the Fable series to be an Xbox exclusive. Microsoft were pleased with the deal and said that they'd made their money back due to the release of the fantastically successful Fable 2. It actually won a BAFTA award for action and adventure in 2009. Lionhead and Microsoft conflicted over the game's marketing. Microsoft believed that role-playing games were about dragons, and they wanted to market the game as such, despite Lionhead's insistence that the game was a Monty Python-esque comedy. According to the Fable art director John McCormack, the marketing was and that dragons had nothing to do with Fable. Fable 3 was released just 18 months later, and again, just like Rare, Microsoft asked them to focus on Kinect features being added. The game didn't do as well, and a few years later Xbox closed the whole studio. These are just 3 examples of game studios that have had to follow the instructions of the Xbox leadership team, and it's either resulted in the team leaving and succeeding, or staying and declining. The PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch, on the other hand, kept dropping new IPs that would go on to outshine their rivals in every term. PlayStation would drop The Last of Us, Uncharted, the God of War series, Final Fantasy and much more. Nintendo would drop Splatoon, Mario Kart, Xenoblade Chronicles and much more. Nintendo and PlayStation supported and encouraged creativity to the game studios, backing them with time, finances, and most importantly, marketing for the new titles. Their game library continued to expand at a record speed, and Microsoft stagnated, unable to push on from the success of the 360 era almost 20 years ago. They had less exclusives, and those that they did have underperformed greatly. Not only had the other 2 consoles caught up by now, they had taken over, and they were way ahead. Who was to blame for this? Well, Microsoft and Xbox. From what we have seen, they have a strong pattern for buying game studios, stifling creativity, and then either shutting the studios down or changing their entire structure. They didn't believe in Time Splitters, and they didn't believe in Destiny. Those games came out 15 years apart, which shows that Xbox are not learning from their mistakes. Just like now, how they've punished Tango Gameworks after the release of Hi-Fi Rush. They told Bungie not to work on Destiny and instead to solely focus on the already established IP of Halo. Just like what the head of Xbox Studios Matt Booty said, these changes are grounded in prioritizing high-impact titles. Focus on the Halos, cut out the hi-fi rushes. This is one reason why Microsoft has stagnated. And then at the back end of 2020, the Xbox Series finally released, and Xbox would then try and make up the ground that it had lost in the previous generation. Instead of releasing just one console, they decided to release two, the Xbox Series S and Series X. One console could take physical discs, while the other would be download only. One would have 364 gigabytes and the other would have 800 gigabytes. One would process faster than the other, and this is when the trouble started. In an attempt to offer financially affordable options for fans, the Series S would only be $250. The X was $500. Although this was a nice option for fans to take up, it meant that developers now had to make their games run on two different consoles, with each one being different. Baldur's Gate 3 would finally come to Xbox in August of 2023. The X would have split screen co-op and the S wouldn't. Why? Because it couldn't handle it. This made it harder for games to be created by studios as they had to make it compatible for both consoles or sacrifice different elements. For example, in Starfield, they had to cut it down to just 30 frames per second to accommodate the Series S. The PlayStation released two versions of their console with the same setup but didn't experience these same problems. At this point, the Kinect had almost disappeared and it was rarely even discussed anymore. But this wasn't the worst move that Microsoft would make. See, these moves are an inconvenience, but Xbox's biggest problem was their Xbox Game Pass. Released in 2017 for the Xbox One, this monthly membership would allow players to download and play games from a huge library without having to buy any of the games outright. For just $9.99 a month, you could download, replay, and select from a huge list of games. The Netflix of gaming, if you will. It was a good idea and it allowed players like myself to play the older titles from previous consoles at no cost and pick and choose. But the bigger problem has come into play now. Xbox releases their exclusives to their Game Pass library immediately. As I stated earlier, they purchased Bethesda for $7.5 billion in March of 2021. Well, it had all been leading up to Bethesda's first Xbox exclusive release, and that was Starfield, a giant open world that allowed players to travel through space. So, Fallout in space. Out on Game Pass from day one, no additional charge. Now, I'm not going to criticize Starfield too much, and if you want to hear my opinion on that game, you can check out the video links in the description, but let's just say it didn't hit the expected heights. But the problem is, with releasing it immediately for Game Pass, the expected revenue would only drop. So for example, let's say Starfield released as a purchasable game only. $60 out for Xbox, PlayStation and PC. Now, Fallout 4 sold 25 million copies, so let's project that this would do the same in sales. This would result in a sales amount of $1.5 billion for the game, a healthy return. But with it coming out on Game Pass, this all changes. First of all, we have to cut out the sales from the PlayStation. So let's be conservative and change it to 15 million copies sold for Xbox. Now, since it's available for Game Pass, which is approximately $10 a month, we can times that number by 15 million and then we'll get 150 million in sales. That is a significant drop, 90% in fact. Now people don't have to buy the game fully outright. They can just download it, try it, maybe play it to completion within a month, then dip out of the Xbox Game Pass. That's good for the gamers as we're saving money, but it's bad for the studios who make the game, and it's bad for Xbox's bottom line, as it has a dramatic reduction in revenue earned. Okay, but what about those who were already on Game Pass, who already had a membership like myself? Now, I didn't go out of my way to join just for Starfield, so technically I got it for free since I was already a member. If Starfield didn't come out, I wouldn't have cancelled my membership. So these figures are actually overstated as a lot of people didn't need to buy the pass. According to Statista, Xbox Game Pass subscriptions have typically increased as each year has passed, but there hasn't been any major shifts in a while. So although the subscription amount has increased over the years, it's nowhere near enough to justify the game coming straight to Game Pass and not going out for sale. Make no mistake, this move hurt Xbox financially. Now, I know people will say, well, they're thinking long term, going all in on the Xbox Game Pass, which will grow as they add more exclusives, and in a way you'd be right, but also wrong. See, in this calculation, we have to add the acquisition of Bethesda for $7.5 billion and then Activision for $70 billion as well. Add this with the choice to release Xbox exclusives immediately for Game Pass, meaning far lesser sales, it's not a good look to the bottom line. Now, I don't have a business degree, but it doesn't take a mathematician to see that it just isn't adding up, at least not anytime soon. Even more worrying is that Hellblade 2 just came out last week for Xbox. It wasn't marketed, there was no advertising, it just sort of popped up. They put effort into marketing Starfield in an effort to bring in new subscribers, but for other games like Hellblade 2, there was nothing. I didn't even know it was out until the other day when I was looking through the store. But besides that, remember Xbox spent $87.5 billion on new IPs and then shut down 4 studios in a pitiful attempt to balance the books. And not just that, they shut down one of the studios that had just released one of the very games that was finally a genuine reason to join Xbox Game Pass. They didn't market that game either, and it only blew up after word of mouth. But it shows what their plan is. They have no time for new concepts or ideas, and set them up to fail, either through lack of marketing, forcing them to convert to their ideas, or shutting the studio down completely when they inevitably fail. But even then, if you do manage to somehow succeed, just like Tango Gameworks did with Hi-Fi Rush, you'll most likely still get the can. They can't afford the cost of making a Hi-Fi Rush 2 or to advertise Hellblade 2, but they sure can afford $70 billion for Activision. Hi-Fi Rush cannot fight their corner by showing good sales figures because they're on Xbox Game Pass. No sales, no way to argue for your studio to continue to exist. How much would they have sold if they weren't on Game Pass? We'll never know. Xbox chief Phil Spencer said, "Perhaps the most important part of my job has been to help bring talented people together, provide the best resources possible, and foster an environment that encourages inspiration, creativity, and unwavering commitment to excellence." The closing of 5 studios, including the one that made Hi-Fi Rush, does not scream encouragement for creativity. The lack of marketing for Hi-Fi Rush and Hellblade 2 doesn't seem an example of providing the best resources possible. The reason for this video and my emotions running so high is not just because I don't understand their business tactic, it's not just because I feel bad for the studios that have had to be closed down, and it's not even just because they've dismantled some of the biggest gaming studios before, it's because they lie. They say one thing, then do another. In one statement, they praise Hi-Fi Rush, saying that it exceeded all expectations, and then in the next breath, they shut the studio down. 1 second they're saying that they support creativity, and then in the next breath they stifle any creativity and force studios to either convert or leave. They say that ZeniMax and Bethesda will still have full control, but then suddenly shut down some of their studios. It makes them unlikable. Nobody likes a liar or being misled. It shows that they can't be trusted with what they're saying. So what's next for Xbox? With the new purchase of Activision, will they double down on Game Pass and release Call of Duty as a day one exclusive? Or will they try to make some sales first? Will they continue to make cuts and keep buying already established IPs? Or will they finally take a look back and see what it is that made them so successful in the first place? Xbox was at its best when it allowed studios to be creative, take risks and be themselves. Xbox has never been that great at creating their own games, and they probably never will be. They bought hit-making studios like Rare and Lionhead Studios and had them make exclusives. Once they inserted themselves, things started to take a drop, and inevitably it failed. When studios like Bungie suggested new ideas, they refused to budge and asked them to focus on guaranteed high-selling IPs like Halo, and then these studios moved on to do better things. And now, here we are again. Microsoft has now gone out and bought two of the most successful studios of modern times in Activision and Bethesda, and will ask them to do the same. And then after the success of smaller games like Hi-Fi Rush, despite exceeding all required targets, they shut them down, and as Matt Booty says, these changes are grounded in prioritizing high-impact titles. So in reality, we're actually seeing the same pattern repeat again and again and again. With Microsoft going all in on the Xbox Game Pass and prioritizing these huge established titles, games will continue to take longer to come out, and smaller studios will continue to be sacrificed as a result. Another huge problem is that the video games are taking longer to create. Xbox bought Bethesda and released Starfield as a huge exclusive for them. That game took 8 years to make, and with expectations that a new Bethesda game won't come out for at least another 6 years, I worry how they're going to attempt to balance the books after these expensive acquisitions. It's said that if a studio were to begin working on a new game today, the earliest it would be able to come out would be in 2030. Games are becoming more expensive and taking longer to produce. If Xbox keeps shutting down these studios who make the smaller games and only focuses on huge IPs, we might only get 1 to 2 games every couple of years. But at the end of the day, Microsoft is a business worth $3.15 trillion. They've not become that big by making wrong decisions at every turn. Maybe there's a long-term strategy here that I can't see, and they have an extra trick up their sleeves. Maybe one day I'll look back and this video will be completely wrong and make me look absolutely foolish. It's not something that I can see, but maybe there is a strategy and we'll just have to wait and see. I've owned every single Xbox console since its release, and I've had great times with their games. I'm sure that they will turn it around sometime in the future. Anyway, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and sorry if I got a little worked up. It's always tough to see people lose their jobs, but even more so when they do fantastic work. But what do you guys think? Do you think Xbox is declining, or do you think that they're actually making the right moves? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like, as it really helps others get to see the video. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. I'm Av Gaming, where we do video game analysis, identifying what makes great games great and what could make good games great as well. Thanks for watching. Av out.